closed and Storytime wasn't available in person. So we've been bringing you great books in partnership with Montgomery County Public Libraries and so many great partners like VisArts and the Friends of the Library. We thank everyone for their partnership, Kid Museum, so many people. Tonight is a very special episode where we are going to talk about a very serious and important topic about race and about racism and about how to deal with it as kids, but also as adults. We have a lot going on in our world right now, not only the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic, but we also have many people protesting for rights for everybody and for Black people and for people of color. And we're going to talk about all that tonight and how we can do a better job of that, both here in Montgomery County, but across the world. So I'm joined by my really good friend, Mortimer the monkey, and he does talk. Hello, everybody. And he squeaks. So he always helps me out, and he's here, and our folks actually named him. So right now we're going to get started, and we are going to air a pre-recorded story time that I did with Dr. Ibram Kendi, who is one of our nationwide renowned scholars around race. And he's going to be reading with me and our kids to make a cameo, so you'll see that, his new book, Anti-Racist Baby. Then we're going to have a discussion with some very important people, some students from MCPS, some young students, first, second, and third, I think, and fourth graders. And then we're going to talk with some of our principals from our great schools and their parents about all that we saw in this, read in this book, but also talk about the discussion afterwards. So thank you for joining us. If you have questions as the video is airing, if you're on Facebook with us, just type them into the chat and leave a message, and my staff is monitoring that, and we will have an interactive discussion when we get to the panel part with the Q&A with the great experts we have from MCPS, along with myself and our kids and our parents. So enjoy, welcome to Storytime, and enjoy the video, and we'll be back with the panel right after. Is the video going yet? Working on?
Running into a problem with picking the window.
It's coming. We're working on it. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Storytime with Councilmember Will Jawando. And we have multiple special guests today. It's a very exciting day of the program. First, to my right is my daughter, Aaliyah. You want to say hi?
Hi.
And who are you holding?
Mr. Mortimer.
Mr. Mortimer the monkey, who we found out last week does what? He squeaks. So Mr. Mortimer says hi too. And we're joined by a very special guest, my good friend, my cousin, and renowned race scholar and just awesome person, Dr. Ibram Kendi, and his beautiful daughter Imani. So hello to you guys. Welcome to Storytime.
Hello. Hello. You want to say hello, Imani?
Hello.
Can you wave at us? Hi. Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's okay. It's good to see you. So this is a special story time. Obviously, a lot going on in our nation right now as we deal with the issues and the legacy of slavery and racism. And so we thought it would be very important to bring to our viewers and have Dr. Kendi come on and read his new book called Anti-Racist Baby, which is a awesome book that he just wrote. I'm going to let him talk about it, but that explains these concepts of anti-racism in a way that kids can understand, because our viewership, Ibram, is around, somewhere between like 5 and 12. So I think this is probably probably 3 and 12 actually. Mm-hmm. And so we have, so we're just really excited. So before we get started, I'm actually not going to read a book today, guys. I'm going to do the welcome song like we normally do. And then I'm going to have Dr. Kendi read his book, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it. And we have my daughter here and Imani here to help us. And you okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. You going to sing the welcome song with me?
Yeah.
No, I think you got to sing it too. And then we're going to read the book. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
We clap and sing hello. We clap and sing hello. With our friends at story time, we clap and sing hello. We wave and sing hello. We wave and sing hello. With our friends at story time, we wave and sing hello. And then I do a little hey, ho, hey, ho. All right, that's our add-on. We got to do that today. And then our last part is we get a deep voice, Imani, and we go, we stomp and sing hello. We stomp and sing hello. With our friends at story time, we stomp and sing hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Storytime. So that's our song. That's our welcome song. Get the wiggles out, too. You like that?
Do you like that, Imani? Huh? Do you like that, Imani? Okay.
All right.
All right. So let me
let's get into the book. And if you want to preface it with anything, you're welcome to do that. But it's your show.
Well, I wrote this book, Anti-Racist Baby, really for Imani, because I wanted to have a tool to begin talking to her about race and racism and about what it means to be anti-racist. And so I'm going to read it a little bit. Imani, you going to help me read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yay!
And who's that on the cover, Imani?
Imani.
Okay. All right. Anti-racist baby is bred, not born. Anti-racist baby is raised to make society transform. Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equity a reality. Okay, what step is that, Imani?
1.
Open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what's right in front of you. All right, what color is that? What number is that? 2. Use your words to talk about race. No one will see racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. All right, what number is that?
3.
Point at policies as the problem, not people. Some people get more while others get less because policies don't always grant equal access. What number is that?
4.
Shout with me. There's nothing wrong with the people.
There's nothing wrong with the people.
There is nothing wrong with the people. Say it again.
Say it again.
Nothing wrong with the people.
All right,
Yes.
Aaliyah needs to say it too. So say it, Aaliyah. Louder.
There's nothing wrong with the people.
All right.
Okay. Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. What number is that?
5.
Celebrate all our differences. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse.
Daddy, I hear you.
You hear me? Okay. What number is this? 6. Knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak and dance and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups voicing their unique views. What number is that?
1.
1 or what's 7? Confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas we sometimes express. What number is that?
8.
Grow to be an anti-racist. Anti-racist baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-racist baby stays curious about all people and isn't all-knowing. And what about that number? What's after 8?
P. Exactly.
It does look like a P.
9.
9. Anti-racist baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and doesn't judge a book by its cover, but reads until
The end.
the end.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Imani and Dr. Kendi. That was awesome. What did you think?
I liked it.
You liked it?
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, bring Mr. Mortimer
He
back.
liked it.
So we were going to have a little conversation. We only have that one book today because we wanted to talk a little bit about. So you wrote it for Imani so expand on that a little bit so that kids her age, obviously her and kids her age, like, we have obviously our 4 children. You wanted them to understand those principles. Why is that so important, like right now, and that message just starting so early? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, if you look at the evidence shows that as early as 6 months, babies start seeing and understanding race. And as early as 2 years old, babies and toddlers start thinking that basically consuming what we call racist ideas and start discerning who to play with based on their skin color. To start deciding, well, this person behaves this way because they're black or white, as early as 2 years old. And so if we're believing that our kids are colorblind, if we're believing that our kids aren't consuming, and understanding race, then who's teaching them to be anti-racist? In a way, we're sort of, by not doing anything, they're basically being nurtured to think that darker skin is uglier than lighter skin, even though that's not true. They're learning to think that, well, maybe white people have more because they are more. Who's teaching them that that's not true? We need to be teaching them, and so that's why I felt it was important to write this book.
Yeah, no, it's such a important point. I mean, you know our family well, and one of the reasons last year I introduced the Crown Act, which is protecting natural hair discrimination, is because Ava, our youngest daughter, when she was 4 years old, came up to me and said, "Well, Daddy, I want my hair to be pretty and straight like the girls on TV." And if you unpack that statement, so many of the things you just said, even in a house where she plays with black dolls and she has parents who pour into her how great she is and how beautiful she is the way God made her, and she knows her heritage, and she has uncles like you and all sorts of things. Even with all that, it so permeates our society and our media and everything that message was still able to get to her, that she wasn't, something about her natural state wasn't what society appreciated. Yeah. And it's a testament to why I think this book is so important. What do you think, Aaliyah?
It's a good book.
When did you start recognizing, Aaliyah's a little older than Imani, so Aaliyah's going to be 10 this year. When did you start recognizing different colors of people? Do you remember?
No, I was little.
You were little, right?
Yeah.
It's fascinating because I think that some parents would say, "Oh, these concepts are just too complex. It's just too hard to really get a young child to understand it." But I think one of the things we do as parents, as you know, Will, is there are many complex concepts that we teach our children before they can fully understand it, like kindness. Right. Like, even though it sounds simple, it's actually quite complex to know how and when and why to be kind, right? Something like love it's very difficult for people to really understand, but we teach them to be kind, to love, even before they can fully understand it. And the older they grow, the more they understand. And we can do the same thing with race and racism.
That's such a good analogy. I'm going to use that one. Thank you, Ibram. But yeah, we have family rules in our dining room, our kitchenette, and concepts: be kind, share, love. Very, like you said, very complex thing that many adults in wars or in big violent campaigns are because those things didn't happen. So they're certainly complex. But you're right. And we continue to grow in our knowledge of those things. That's exactly right. So, Aaliyah, what did you say when he was like, "Yeah, kindness is hard"? What did you mean? What were you thinking about when you said that?
When I fight with Ava.
Speak up.
When I fight with
when you fight with your sisters. Yes, that is a common challenge, right? No, it's interesting too. The one thing I appreciate about your book, and I want you to talk a little bit about, is it goes directly at the topic And I know, Imani. So we read a book last week called The Other Side, which is a older book. It's about like when segregation.
Jacqueline Woodson's book.
Yes, I think we have it here, actually.
Yeah, Jacqueline. Yeah, we have that book, right, Imani?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
It's a beautiful book, but it's so simplistic in the way that it kind of, the analogy of the fence, or the use of the fence and the other side, and how they conquered that part of their history, and that time when you weren't supposed to talk to people on the street that were a different color, white and black weren't supposed to mix, and how they did it anyway, and how her mother kind of did it. But it was kind of like under the radar, right? And so talk to me a little bit about the need for being direct, if you agree with that premise, like of just kind of really getting right at it, and not in the way that is so elegantly done by Miss Woodson because of the time period. If you get my question.
Well, I think that both are incredibly important, particularly for young children. And so I think we underestimate the capacity of young children to understand concepts and theories, right? And so I think we should be teaching them abstract sort of concepts and theories, but at the same time, just like with adults, we learn through stories, right? And so to have both the teaching of these sort of ideas, like, use your words to talk about race, and then you see in a story how a child used their words to address racism. I think both of them are incredibly important. And that's what I felt was lacking. I felt that there wasn't a book that was, very direct, really teaching kids and even their parents concepts so that they can more fully understand some of the great literature that that is out there today.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. Like, I totally agree. I love The Other Side. It's a great book. But most of I think it's kind of like our societal, shame, or not wanting to talk about race in a real way. And obviously we're in a different moment in time now. So I think you're right. The compliment of your book being so direct and really helps explain other books like that. So what did you think of the book, Aaliyah? So for our kids, you're 9 years old. When you hear that book that we just read, what does that make you think anything about with your interactions with your friends or anything? What were you thinking?
I don't really know what I was thinking. I was just listening to the words and the pictures.
Well, what do you think about with your friends at school and noticing race? What does it mean to you with your friends at school? And how do you all treat each other? Do you see anyone being treated differently? Or do you guys think that you were doing what the book says, where you're like accepting of everybody?
Yeah, we were nice. We were all friends. Sometimes we were a little mean to each other, though. But we were, most of the time, good friends.
No matter what the races were.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that gives me a lot of hope. It's like racism being a taught behavior, like you said, in a complex thing that our kids are getting one way or the other. So so a question for you, Grim, you can talk about anything else. The protests that we're seeing, the diversity of them, the scale, global, what does that mean to you, and what do you think it means for this moment in time in history where we are in our ability to actually conquer some of these challenges?
I think the diversity of the protesters and the demonstrators, the scale of them, we're seeing it in the smallest of towns and in counties to the largest of cities and places. I think what that shows me is, I think more and more Americans are seeing, for instance, police violence or racism as an American problem. That this isn't a Black problem. This isn't this is an urban problem. Right. This isn't a problem of those specific people who are dying at the hands of police guns or even knees. That this is an American problem, and it's something that Americans collectively need to demonstrate against and need to eliminate.
Yeah, it's our problem. It's our collective, not our Black people, but the country, right?
Yeah, and part of it is, Du Bois, a great Black scholar, once sort of wrote this book, Souls of. You want to go to Mommy? Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna let Aaliyah go too. Say bye, Mommy.
Bye.
Sorry. W.B. Du Bois once wrote in The Souls of Black Folk to Black people, how does it feel to be a problem? And I'm hoping that Americans realize that Black people have never been the problem. No racial group has ever been the problem. Racism has always been the problem, and that's what we should be looking at. Yeah,
it's interesting. There's like an awakening. You know, I've been talking about as a policymaker since before I was elected. You know, as a staffer working in policy in White House and other places about institutional racism and how it manifests in so many ways in all of our systems. Obviously, in the criminal justice and police, in terms of police violence. And I think with the murder of George Floyd, people are it was a watershed moment where people who didn't think, they thought it maybe was coincidental or it was Black people's fault because they were had criminals, their criminality was something that they did or they lived in poor neighborhoods. They're saying that no, something actually, and there's some polling out, I saw it today, that majority of white Americans think, that majority of Americans think that we need to do something around police reform. They might not disagree on what to do or how to do it, but that some reform is required. And that certainly seems like progress. Would you agree with that?
Oh, without question. I mean, recent polling data is showing that there's been even more Black Americans are viewing racism and police brutality as a problem. But the largest jump, particularly during this current administration, has been among white Americans. A double-digit polling jumps in terms of the number of white Americans who view racism as a big problem, and thereby it needs big solutions. And I think that's why people are serious right now.
So I'll ask you one more thing, and then if there's anything you want to add, I'll let you go. I've been saying, which is a version of what you said, that systemic problems require systemic solutions, right? Big problems, you can't tweak a systemic problem, right? It's going to take a sustained, large effort over time. One of my biggest concerns, and why I'm trying to work now with such urgency, we've introduced some use of force bills, and we're moving forward fast. I'm trying to get rid of police in schools and do a whole bunch of things, is that the moment history shows us that this moment of urgency will pass at some point. And then what do we do? And how do we keep the staying power? I'm hopeful that we can learn enough, things like your book with the kids and all the other, the books that you've written for adults, like How to Be an Anti-Racist and Stand from the Beginning. Get those if you don't have those, adults. So if you could talk to me about the moment and how you see us having the longevity and the staying power and the tools that we need to continue on this, even when people aren't in the streets.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important for us to compare this to, there was a time during these recent demonstrations where you both had people actively demonstrating against police and racism more broadly. I shouldn't say police violence, and then racism more broadly. And then you also had some, small segment of people who were violently attacking the police or who were, attacking property. And at that moment, policymakers had a choice. Would they respond both to the immediacy of both problems, or would they respond only to the immediacy of trying to defend property and police? And I think, you saw some policymakers respond to the immediacy of both, since they were declaring both were a problem. And then you had some saying, oh yes, this racism is a problem, it's a longstanding problem, but they weren't issuing with urgency any new immediate policy changes in the way when they were issuing curfews, calling in the National Guard, trying to enact policy that would stem violence against property. And so I think that I'm saying this all to say that there was a time in this country, there was a time in this country where there was this split between Americans who were calling for immediate end to slavery
Right.
and Americans who were saying, oh, we need gradual abolition.
Right.
And history has told us that those who were calling for immediate systemic end to slavery were right. Just as the people right now who are calling for the same with urgency, I think are going to be proved to be right one day.
Yeah, and that's a great comparison. And even after abolition came, we know just celebrating Juneteenth, and we know it didn't come for all, and it took a long time. And then you had a whole system of post-Reconstruction that was slavery by another name, in mass incarceration and the like. So even if you go for the most urgent thing, you're still going to have a lot of work ahead of you, I think, is another lesson from that period.
And I also don't want people, what I also think is happening, maybe with some people, is they're shedding themselves of cynicism. In other words, they realize that, for instance, if no-knock warrants were illegal in Louisville, that Breonna Taylor may still be living. They realize the role policy and policy change is, and then they start to think, okay, how can we go about in my local community ensuring that there's policies that are leading to equity and justice? That's what I'm hoping is happening.
Well, I can tell you, I've been in office almost 2 years, and in the last 3-4 weeks, I've received, more than 5,000 emails of people wanting reform, wanting
Wow.
police reform. By far and that's the scale of that is 10 20 times the normal amount. And so I do think that's happening, and like I said, the bill we introduced last week will ban chokeholds, will ban no-knock warrants, will raise the standard for use of force, deadly force, to only be used after all other options when it's absolutely necessary. Some things that we know that if you do, like you said, would literally keep people alive. There's certainly much more we have to do. All right, this will be my last question, because since I have you, I want to ask you this. We introduced last week, or we passed last week, my council, and this has happened in about 14 or 15 other jurisdictions around the country, a resolution declaring racism a public health emergency. And I've been saying, and as you know, we die in so many ways. We certainly die at the hands of police, Black people, Black men and women, at the rates higher than anywhere else in the world. But we also die from COVID. 1 in 4 of the deaths here in Montgomery County are Black residents, even though we don't make up that percentage of the population. We die in hospitals because doctors don't think we're sick. We die because of pre-existing health conditions. Because of inequities in healthcare. We die from asthma because we live in environmentally degraded communities. We get hit by cars, trucks, and buses more. Go down the list, because we were forced to live in certain communities that are underinvested in and don't have walkways. So I'm pushing the governor in our state in Maryland, and hopefully more places will do this. I'm curious about your assessment of that as a tool, because for me, I think embedded in what you were saying in this book that you read today, connecting racism to these issues in a direct way and saying that it's urgent that we act, and then having a plan to do it. That's very important, because I think many people don't know that. So I'd be curious of what your thought of is this movement that we've seen of racism as a public health emergency.
So I think COVID-19 and the disparities in COVID-19 has proved this to be correct. There was a time in which many Americans were saying that Black people were infected and dying at higher rates because they weren't taking the coronavirus as seriously as white people. That's been proven to not be true. Then they switched to what's because Black people have more pre-existing conditions. But actually, recent research has found that what's actually more predictive of Black death and infection rates, higher Black death and infection rates, is the air and water quality of one's neighborhood. And so then when we think of why is it that Black and even brown people are more likely to live in neighborhoods that have poor air and water quality? Racism. Another predictor of Black infection and death rates has been employment status. So we know, why is it that Black and even Latinx people are more likely to not be able to work from home during COVID? Why are they disproportionately in service-related industries? Racism. Another factor is access to high-quality healthcare. And so why is it that in a place like Southwest Georgia, which has some of the highest death rates in the country and also is a majority Black area, that there is not as much healthcare and healthcare facilities as in Atlanta or New York City. And this is a rural Black sort of largely impoverished area. Racism. And, why is it that Black and Latinx people are less likely to be insured, which is another factor leading to Black deaths and also hospitalizations? Racism. So you go down the list of the causes of these racial health disparities in general, or even specific to COVID-19, and you see the causes of it being racism. So it makes sense to declare racism a public health emergency.
I appreciate the stamp of approval. It's nice to hear that, because I think people need to hear that because, of all ages, because it again, big problems, systemic problems require systemic solutions. You won't have the will to do what needs to be done. I've been saying, if you start 16, 19, obviously Black people were here before then, but if you start there from that documented history and go through now, for the majority of that time that Black people have been on this continent in a formal way, we've either been enslaved or legally discriminated against by the state, right? And you don't just, and I think I saw one figure, it was like 86% of the time, if you go through 1965 Voting Rights Act. So you don't just disentangle that with one bill or one effort. It's going to take time and work. So, and I think necessitated in that is what you just described. People have to understand how all these systems are intertwined. Well, awesome to have you here. I really appreciate you coming out, and so excited that you're able to get this message out to the youngest of us, of our children, and to the adults. Because I think both of your books, How to Be an Anti-Racist and Anti-Racist Baby, are both on back order and both sold out. But people should still get them, So we really appreciate you coming to Storytime.
Of course, yeah, I'm excited I was able to come to it. I'm glad you organized this and gave parents some breaks in the middle of the day.
Yeah,
during homeschooling.
It's funny because I said I would do it as long as the libraries are closed, and so this is, we're like approaching like day 60, wow. of doing this, and so it's become a part of my DNA at this point. So I think I'm probably, our libraries are set to open for curbside on July 6th. So I think we're going to go to a different schedule starting then, maybe do it only once or twice a week. But it's been fun, and and I know everyone will appreciate this. This will probably be one of our highest viewed story times. So we'll make sure you see it. And Imani, thank you for joining us for so much of the time.
You want to say thank you?
All right. Well, it's good to see you, and keep fighting. And we're excited that you're going up to Boston University to run a center there. So look forward to what's to come, and really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. And, of course, thank you for your work. I'm sure the constituents, really appreciate you, because we do nationally.
I appreciate that. All right. So Imani, we're going to sing our goodbye song. Imani, I have to teach you our hand washing song. All right. So we'll do this at the end, and then we'll say bye. So this is how it goes. You do this 2 times, and you do it with warm soap and water, and you follow the instructions, and your hands are clean, and you don't spread any germs, no viruses, nothing. All right. So this is how it goes. You ready? Are you watching? Okay. Tops and bottoms, in between. Rub them all together. Now they're clean. Now they're clean.
Now they're clean. Oh, wow. Good job, Imani.
There you go. Good job. My kids do that. Even my 17-month-old little Will, he knows the song now because I sing it every day. So all right. Well, bye, everybody. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Welcome back. I hope everyone enjoyed that awesome story time with Dr. Ibram X. Kendi and Imani and Aaliyah, my oldest daughter, and of course with Mr. Mortimer the monkey. So I want to thank again Dr. Kendi for joining us and sharing some really insightful information, as well as reading his great book that taught us some really good lessons. So we're going to talk about that now, and it's a great jumping off point for our discussion that we're transitioning into now with some of our very own Montgomery County Public Schools students and their parents. So it's my pleasure to welcome first, well, all at the same time, they're going to turn their cameras on, Robert Anthony and his parents, Philip and Lois. Hi guys, how are you? And then we have also Khalil, and I'm turning my so I can see everybody. There we are. We have Khalil and his mom, Candace. Hello to you. Wave so people can, there you go. All right. And then we have Divine and her mom, Huma. Hi, how are you guys? Good to see you.
Good, how are you?
Good, good, good. And then we have also Thomas and his mom, Margaret. Hi. Good to see you. And so we have, we're also joined by Mr. Troy Body, who is the director of the equity. And guys, if you're not talking, put mute on so that we can hear, okay? We're not talking. We have Troy Body, who's the director of equity initiatives and units at MCPS. Mr. Body, thank you for being here. And then we have the principals of these students. So I know they're going to be on best behavior tonight. And these principals have been great because they've been doing work with their students around race, and they're going to be very helpful tonight. Principal Cassandra Heifetz from Glen Haven Elementary School. How you doing?
Thank you for having me.
No problem. And then we have Principal Natasha, is that right? Bolden, Principal Bolden from Mill Creek Town Elementary. How are you?
Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our kids, principals, parents panel. And so I'll start it off, and the Principal Bolden and Principal Heifetz are going to help me with asking questions because I know they're very familiar with the students. I'll start us off with the first question, and then we'll go around and everyone can give an answer, okay, since we have a relatively small group. First, I want to know what I'm going to put a new question, actually. What did you think of the book? And tell me how it made you feel, and had you heard the book before, and what did you think about the book? Let's start with Divine.
I thought that it's important that everyone is different because God made all of us different, and that's really interesting because some people can say, oh, it's because you are black, you can't do anything. That's just something that people would just say to make you feel bad because of your color, but you're perfect the way you are.
Amen. Thank you very much. How about you, Thomas? What did you think of the book?
Well, I think, well,
Did you like it?
yes.
Did you like it? Yeah.
Yes, that's fun. Also,
No
We'll come
pressure. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. No pressure. No pressure. So we're talking about how to be anti-racist, and it gave us some strategies, right, in the book. So you can just talk about how it made you feel, or you can talk about something specific. There's no right or wrong answer, right? So how about you, Robert Anthony? What did you think of the book?
I thought that you should always be kind to others, even if they're not the same skin color as you. You can always be nice.
Awesome. That's a very good lesson. I thought the same thing. What about you, Khalil?
I liked it because, so people like black people.
Is your adult?
You liked it because?
I don't know.
You just liked it. All right, that's good. You could that's a good answer. I like it too. All right, so now we'll get into some of our questions about you, and then I'm going to kick it off to Principal Heifetz for the second question. So the question I'd like to ask. Oh, and if you're going to, if you have questions from the audience, this is a good time to say it. You can type us a message on Facebook or send an email to me. Anyway, any of my social media, my staff is looking at it. But the easiest way is if you type a comment on the Facebook feed, live feed, and we'll try to get to those questions after we finish these questions. So let's go reverse order. Khalil, I'm coming back to you. How would you describe yourself, and what do you like about yourself? You gotta go off of mute though, so I can hear you. How would you describe yourself, and what do you like about yourself?
I like about myself that I'm kind to my friends, and I also like about.
You're doing okay, great. You also like what?
And I also like to play soccer, and I also like to play with my friends or other friends that I don't know, to play with them if nobody else plays with them.
Oh, so you like meeting new people if they feel lonely or something. That's really cool. That's really good. Same question to Robert Anthony. Just how would you describe yourself, and what do you like about yourself? You gotta go off of mute. There you go.
I like about myself that I'm kind to others, and I like to play with my friends and be kind to them and not say mean stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I like that. That's a great thing about yourself. All right, same question. Thomas, are you back, or you see your camera off? Maybe you need a break right now? That's okay. We'll come back to you. Divine, Miss Divine. How would you describe yourself, and what do you like about yourself?
I describe that I'm kind. I also love my family a lot. I also respect my friends even if they are a different color than me. I also like playing some video games with my friends. I also like to do a lot of sports. I sometimes like making cakes with my mom. I like to do a lot of stuff. I also like talking a lot, which a lot of people say I'm mistalkative.
Hey, that's
as my personality.
That's
and
awesome.
I like also doing selfies with my mom, which a lot of people say
This would be a good day to do a selfie. Today. Awesome. Well, those are great answers, and what sticks out to me is that kindness, accepting people, no matter who they are, and that's certainly consistent with what we read in the book today, and I know what you all have been learning, so that's awesome. I'm going to kick it over to Principal Heifetz to tee up and ask our next question.
All right. So we asked you first, how you describe yourself, but what I want to know now is, how do you think other people would describe you? If somebody met you a little bit, what might they say about you? Why don't we start with Robert Anthony?
They would say nice stuff.
Speak up.
They would say nice stuff.
Like what?
Like, can you be my friend?
Talk to the camera. What would they say?
Like, can you be my friend?
They'd want to be your friend? Yeah. Khalil, how would somebody describe you?
Somebody could describe me as a good friend.
A good friend. Awesome. Hey, Thomas, could you tell us how you think somebody might describe you?
Well, yeah, all you have to do to make friends is how to
How people describe you?
Well, people when I would say nice things, they would like compliment me or something.
I bet.
Very cool.
Divine, how would people describe you?
People will describe me friendly, very fashionable of wearing all my stuff my mom buys me. I also people describe me smart. I like to read a lot. People notice that about me. Also, people describe me what else do they describe me? They describe that I'm really kind to a lot of people and that I care about and respect everybody.
That is so awesome. I love how you all found good things to share about how people would describe you. I'm gonna give the next question to Principal Bolden.
Hi guys. So my question is, it's really a yes or no question. Do you think all people are treated the same based on their skin color? Divine, what do you think?
I think that no, but because I think no, because a lot of we can see that how George Floyd died was because of how this white person treated him, and not everyone got to be treated right over all these years.
Thank you, Divine. Khalil, what do you think? Do you think all people are treated the same because of their color?
Nope.
Why not?
Because other people won't play with them because some people don't like black people, so they won't play with them. But some other people do.
That's right. It's not everybody, but there's enough. Thomas, you ready, buddy? All right. What do you think?
Well, I think no and yes, but mostly no. Mostly no because it's been good for a couple years, like I don't know, like 10 or 12. I'm not sure.
Things are better.
Yeah, they're better than they were before, and then that guy got killed, so I think it switched back to no, they don't get treated the same way as white people.
Thanks, Thomas. Robert Anthony, what do you think?
I think black and white people should be treated the same way as, yeah.
Why?
So you think they should be treated the same?
It's not fair to black people.
What?
Thank you.
That's very, very informative and insightful answers from you all. Thank you so much. One of the things in the book was the lessons was that we shouted, if you remember, there is nothing wrong with the people. And we have to remember that no matter who you are, there's nothing wrong. So I have another question that I'm going to ask for everybody. When did you start, and we talked about this a little bit in the conversation I had with Dr. Kendi and my daughter and his daughter. When did you start to recognize or notice that people were different colors? Let's start with Robert Anthony. When did you start to recognize or notice that people were different colors? Do you remember?
About when I was 4.
About 4. And how old are you now?
8.
Okay. So, and when you noticed that, what did it mean? How did it make you feel? Or how did you think about it? Do you remember?
No.
Not really. You just started noticing around 4. Okay. What about you, Miss Divine? When did you start noticing different people's colors?
When I was 3 and my mom started talking about it.
What did she say to you?
She said that sometimes people would treat you different from your color, but that doesn't mean you're not, a good person. That doesn't mean like you're not. It doesn't mean that you're not perfect. It means that some people don't get treated the right way that they should be, but it doesn't. It means that you are perfect the way you are. It doesn't mean that you're not perfect.
Amen. And I think you got to turn down the volume of so when you listen to yourself, you're hearing it twice, but that's okay. Thomas, what about you? When did you start to recognize that people were different skin colors?
Well, when I was like 5 or 4 or 5. So when I recognized, this was when I turned 4 years old. We were at Italy, and I had a birthday at this place called Monkey Planet, and it's like an arcade place. And my birthday was there, and like lots of black people and white people were there, and I realized that they were all different colors. So I was like,
yeah, and that's really, thank you for that story. That's really interesting and descriptive about where you first recognized it. And then last but not least, Khalil, when did you start recognizing that people were different colors?
I think it's about 4 or 3, but when I was 4, well, I was one of my first schools when I was in Florida where I was born. I went to a different school and saw lots of white people, and then I got teachers.
Very good, very good. And I have my children say about the same thing around like 3 or 4, and as we said in the discussion, kids actually start recognizing around 2 and start making differences. So it's good that you're talking about this now. I want to turn back to Principal Heifetz for the next question.
All right, so you've all played on playgrounds and in the park with lots of different kids. And so I want you to think a little bit about what if you heard someone say, I can't play with you because your skin isn't white. So take a moment and think about that. Maybe you've even heard that. Somebody says, I can't play with you because your skin isn't white. How would that make you feel? And what might you say or do? Khalil, since you're not on mute, let's start with you. How would that make you feel, and what might you say or do if you heard that?
Mostly where our park, we don't do that. But so I would say that would hurt my feelings, and you would have your feelings hurt if you got treated like that. You should think a second time of saying a mean word.
Excellent. Thank you, Khalil. Divine, how would that make you feel, and what would you do or say?
I would feel hurt, but I would say I don't appreciate that, but I will go play by myself or play with someone that appreciates that I can play with them.
Thank you, Divine. Robert Anthony?
If someone said that I can't play with them because I'm not the same skin color as them, I would feel really sad, and I would go play on with somebody else that treats me a different way that is nicer.
And Thomas, the question I have for you is just a little bit different. So let's say you wanted to play with Robert Anthony or Khalil or Divine, and somebody said to you, don't play with them, their skin isn't white. How would that make you feel, and what would you do or say?
I would like say like, no, I think I should like go with them because it's not nice like going against someone. So I would just start playing with whoever they are.
I really like how you would stand up for your friend and really show that you can be friends with people of different colors. Thank you so much, Thomas. Principal Bolden.
All right, guys, I have a question for you. And Thomas, I'm going to start this question with you because in your community, in your neighborhood where you live, you guys had a march. You guys had a peaceful march. And the reason why you had that march is because there's so much going on in the world. And people are really starting to talk about race and racism and equity. And, you know, when you guys had your march out there, everybody was saying that Black Lives Matter. I want to know from you first, Thomas, what do you wish that grown-ups would do to end racism?
Well, if wait, oh,
What do you think parents should do? What should we do to end this?
I think we should probably just say like to all the people that are racist, like don't go against white people. It's not the right thing to do. Like, yeah, basically.
So you think we should tell people who are racist not to go against people because of their color, because it's not the right thing to do?
Yeah, cause color doesn't matter. It's just a color. It's not
All
like
right. Thanks, Thomas. Robert Anthony, what do you think the grown-ups should do to end racism?
I think grown-ups, they should teach their kids to not be racist.
I agree. I think that's a great idea. So you think it starts with the kids, huh?
Yes.
All right. Khalil, what do you think grown-ups should do to end racism?
Grown-ups should do to end race, end races?
To end racism.
To change it, to change the law about the end races, to make sure white people and Black people will no longer fight, like saying, no, you can't play with us or be mean about that. You're white or Black.
So Khalil, I hear you saying that we need to make sure that there are some laws that exist so that people can't be racist. Well, that's great because we're on with Councilmember Jawando, and he's one of the people who has to make laws. Help out with that. Yeah, you didn't know that, did you?
His eyes got pretty big there, you know.
Really big, right? All right, Divine, what do you think us grown-ups need to do to help end racism?
I think that we should set a good example for our kids that we should not be racist. And it's important that the parents can like set examples showing that you have to be polite and kind, to show respect, even if somebody's like being very rude because you're Black.
So Divine, I think I hear you saying that grown-ups need to be a good example of how not to be racist. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All you guys gave wonderful, wonderful answers. Thank you so much.
I agree. And we actually have one of the comments that was posted on the Facebook chat about you, all of you kids, it said, these kids are wise and have great character. And I agree. I agree with that. So we have one more question from that we prepared, and then we're going to talk a little bit with your parents and the principals a little bit. So kids, you can hang out for that, or you can go do something else, because I know you guys have been very patient. So it's up to you after this one. But this is your last question. What should your principals do to celebrate, or what do they do? Because I know we have two really great principals here. What should or what do they do to celebrate everyone's differences and to make sure that everyone in your school feels important and feels special? So Thomas, you like jumped up with your hand. So I'm going to go to you first, buddy. What do your principals do, or what should they do?
Well, we always do international night like every year. And a bunch of people just gather around and show different states that have all different skins in each state. Yeah.
And at international night, and that's good, right? Because you learn about people and cultures that you didn't know about before, right? Very good, very good. I always loved international night. Robert Anthony, what about you? What should or are your principals doing to make everyone feel special?
In Glen Haven, we have flags
Of different countries.
of different countries.
International night.
International night
Black Lives Matter.
and Black Lives Matter.
Very good, very good. What about you, Miss Divine? What should your principals or are they doing to make everyone feel special?
What I think they should do is talk about it and bring two colors together, like white and black, and put them together and let them get through their racism and forget about all that drama that happened in the past and become a brand new community of both colors. And I have an example once of one of my teachers. We were doing show and tell, and I wanted to talk about this story about a boy who was black, and she felt uncomfortable because there were white students and black students there. So she wanted us to move on from that.
Wow. And what did you do?
I really didn't do much. I said, okay.
Okay, grandma.
Yeah, and I spoke about my grandma after that, and then I felt comfortable about the problem.
Very good. Khalil, what about you? What should your principals do to celebrate everyone's differences, or what do they do?
So like on the day this day happened, so like when it started of the parade thing, rugby parade. I don't know. A parade?
What kind of parade?
What kind of parade was it?
Sort of like a parade with other people and throwing things out, like cards or stuff.
Are you making this up?
No.
Okay. A parade. That sounds good to me. I like it. So what I wanted to say, I don't know, before the kids go, because no, Mr. Body, you're going to stick around for the next part, correct? Okay. I want to say thank you to Thomas and to Khalil and to Robert Anthony and to Miss Divine and to all the other kids, because we always remember at Storytime, we've had a lot of people. We've had hundreds of people that have been watching this. And before it's all over, because this is the way it works, we do this live, and then thousands of people watch it later whenever they want, because it's still up there. So thousands of people are going to watch what you were saying and learn from you. And you guys really taught us a lot about how to treat people, how to talk about racism and race, and that we're all equal and should be treated fairly, and we're all unique, even with all of our differences. So I'm just so proud of you and really happy that you were able to join me. So thank you all for coming, all to Thomas and to Khalil and to Robert and Divine.
Say one. Say thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome, and we're working hard to make sure that you have some normal learning at some point, but we got to get rid of this virus. So hang in there. I know it's tough, but hang in there. I'm going to ask your parents and the principals and Mr. Body to stick around. We're going to have a conversation with them. So you guys can go do whatever you want to do at this point, and you're free. I saw Thomas put his jacket on. He was ready to go a couple minutes ago.
Wait.
Bye. All right. Well, I'm going to, and if you have questions, again, if you're following us on Facebook, or you can email my office, we'll respond there too. This is for this part of the panel. We're happy to answer and respond, but I really appreciate all the parents sticking around, and the principals and Mr. Body. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Body, maybe to just talk a little bit about what MCPS is doing around talking about race in this critical moment where we are. And then I'd love to have the parents jump in and respond to what you have to say and what they're seeing with their kids. And we can just have a dialogue for a few minutes.
Absolutely. We have been working at really building awareness about how to have these conversations. When I first started doing this job, the question was, why do we have to talk about this? And now the conversation has evolved to, how do I talk about race and other difficult conversations? So it's been a nice evolution. And it's a work in progress, because if many of us think about, like, when growing up, our parents usually told us to shh when we were talking about differences and those kind of things. So in Montgomery County Public Schools, we're trying to normalize these kind of conversations with adults, so they feel comfortable as they encounter students' questions. Like Divine's example was a great example of what happens sometimes when people aren't equipped to have these conversations. These conversations usually get shut down. So as part of our work, we do system-wide training on cultural proficiency, implicit bias. We, my staff, along with other specialists in central office, go out to schools and support their knowledge and skills around race, racism, and how to interrupt these practices. We do modules. We have study circles where we engage in dialogue and really unpack the barriers to policies, practices, and procedures that, a lot, very, very much aligned to your work. It's like the real work is when we change those practices and policies. And so that's just some of the work that we're doing. We're also going to look at our curriculum and elevate other opportunities to really address anti-bias in our school system.
That's great. I don't know if Principal Heifetz or Bolden want to add anything before we turn to the parents, and then we'll just have a dialogue.
Sure. So, I think just kind of talking about the work that Mr. Body explained that's happening at the system level, at the school level. I know at Glen Haven, we try to bring all that into our site and make sure that our staff are engaging in those conversations. And we use, our professional learning structures to engage in book studies and create those opportunities for courageous conversation, and to build the capacity of our staff to think about things on different levels. So it's, understanding that a lot of our staff do not look like or share backgrounds similar to the students that they teach. And so for some of that first work is really having teachers and adults go through that internal reflection on, who am I? What background do I bring to the classroom and to the schoolhouse? And how does that impact the work I'm doing with students? So a lot of what we do at Glen Haven is around creating those opportunities for those learnings and those conversations, and then using that to think about what those next steps are in the classroom.
That's great. Principal Bolden, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd like to, just add to what Mrs. Heifetz was saying, along with those things as well, making sure that we are engaging in the courageous conversations and providing staff with the tools to have courageous conversation. There's some very specific things that we've been doing recently. We're at a very critical juncture in our history, and you know, as a leader of a school building, I felt like it was incumbent upon me to strike while the iron is hot. We've been talking about race and talking about equity for a really long time, for years. And, you know, sometimes it feels like we have a difficult time moving beyond the talk. And so now is a time where we need to find ourselves on the right side of history. And it's time for us to step into do. And so one of the things that we are doing this summer is that we are actually, my staff is engaging in a voluntary book study of how to be an anti-racist. And as we talked about our purpose, we talked about the fact that our purpose truly is the how-to. How are we going to be anti-racist? And how do we now learn how to create an anti-racist school environment for our students and our families in our school building? What do we as the grown-ups in the building have to do? What is the work that we need to do in terms of curriculum? What is the work that we have to do in terms of instruction? But what is the work that we have to do internally in terms of seeing ourselves and our bias and how that plays out with our children in the school building? So that's our work. And, you know, while we are away and we don't have, you know, we're not in the building and we're not tired at the end of the day, while we have this time to really sit and reflect, we're going to figure it out so that when we get back in there, we can hit the ground running.
It's such an important point. I remember I went to MCPS for part of my academic career, and I went to Oakview Elementary, so shout out to Oakview. And that was actually where the first time I was called the N-word in 4th grade. And I was walking home from school. I was walking up Wayne Avenue, and my book bag brushed older white woman's by accident. And she said, you know, watch where you're going, you little N-word. And it just took me aback. I just couldn't believe it. And I realized, you know, that I had noticed racial difference, but it was the first time I realized that I could be treated so poorly because of it. And I didn't know how to process it and who to talk to. And I was so fortunate that I had the only Black male teacher I ever had, Mr. Williams, who taught math at Oakview Elementary at that time. And I was able to process it with him the next day. And, you know, I was very fortunate. But you think about how many kids haven't, you know, had that opportunity, or the teachers weren't equipped with the training or the knowledge themselves to do it. And that's such an important point. So your point about doing that work and is so critical.
Mr. Jawando, may I add something?
Yeah.
One of the things that we know is that elementary schools are largely white spaces. And so most of the time, our teaching staff does not match, is not a perfect match to the racial makeup of our students in our schools. And so it makes it so that we have to create the conditions for our white teachers to be able to do the work of race and equity. We have to ensure that these folks are able to, you know, are comfortable speaking about race and are comfortable saying that someone is Black or someone is white, and that they don't shut down a child who has a book with Black characters because it makes them feel uncomfortable. That there is work to be done. And it's not an indictment against anyone because there's work to be done. It is simply a statement of fact. We have to get people on board. We have to make sure that our white teachers are allies because the children of color in front of them need them to be.
Yeah, thank you for that. I want to turn to the parents, and you can just wave at me, and I'll, you know, if anyone, I'd love to hear all of your reaction to, I know this is a lot, I really appreciate it. It's already been a success, but any reaction to what has been said by the children or by the principals about, and how do you see this work going forward, and how do you reinforce it with your kids? Any concerns you have, it's really open for you. So who wants to go first? All right, Hawa, I think up top, Divine's mom, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I don't know how to do that.
There you go.
Well, before I make the suggestions that I want to say, when Divine was in kindergarten, she was in Chris McAuliffe, we were in Germantown. She had a great year. She had issues usually on the way home in the bus, not in school usually. I guess actually she was Miss Rosa Pack once. So she and her teacher was a Caucasian, and she was very nice and accommodating. Then she moved to Mill Creek School, where on the day I went in to register, she was welcomed from the very moment. It felt like home. She was so happy. She and the secretary were together. So it did not make the transition difficult for her. She got to fit in easily. What I noticed most times coming home, she get bullied a little bit in the bus. So I will add, like, I don't know what the bus drivers are trained how to respond to those things if they notice them in the bus coming home, because she would come to me and explain, and I would say, well, what did you say? They say, your hair doesn't look good. Say, well, I like it anyway, and just don't let it bother you too much to make you feel too sad. And in the situation where she mentioned, she was talking to one of her favorite teachers, and there was this story, I don't even know much about it. It was a young boy who was, something happened many years ago, like I think 1944, June 16, that had to be executed. I don't know how she come about that story, and she had it on her phone and was about to talk about it in class. Well, it was a sad story, and I'm sure probably the teacher wasn't kind of ready to discuss that with little kids around and see how they would react to that. So that's why she was shut up, kind of said, let's don't talk about that right now. We'll talk about that later. So she had to reach out to her grandmother to explain why did this happen. That was a very young boy, So I guess the collective conversations that we are doing, teaching the kids to appreciate who they are, acknowledge that diversity is a great thing, that you can be enriched more by learning new things. I teach Divine to eat foods from different cultures and stuff, because that's how you know how great the world you find yourself in. Be open every day that you may face those issues, but I'll teach them how to handle it. But mostly equip the teachers to be able to handle it for them and give them that open medium to talk about it when they have a need to in school, where they can go do that in private and be confidential, that they feel free that this is where I come to grow and not to hide who I am.
Mm-hmm. Very important. Candace, anything you want to add? I know I'm calling on you. If not, we can skip you this time.
No, I have things to add. I do want to say that as a parent with Glen Haven, I've experienced difficulties with my child and his behavior and some family issues, and the school has been very forthcoming and helpful with me from beginning to end. And they didn't treat my child as a little black boy with disciplinary problems. He was just a child with disciplinary problems, and it had circumstances surrounding those, but I felt comfortable and confident that they were doing what they could and went above and beyond to make sure that he was getting the attention he needed, but not singling him out. So I felt that love, and I felt like he knew that they had his back, and it was great that we all were able to come together, have those conversations, get involved with the counselor, the teacher, the principals. We all came up with a plan to get him on track, and he was able to get back on track, but that took a team of teachers all being patient and understanding and trained to deal with little black boys or just cultural competence in general. So I appreciate what I've received from Glen Haven, and thanks, Principal Heifetz.
Very good, very good. Let's go to Margaret. Any reflections on what we've heard tonight?
Sure. No, feel bad for poor Thomas. He was on the spot. He kind of froze up on the screen, but
oh, that's all right.
No, with all this, all of these issues weigh very heavily on me, and I think something I've struggled with as a parent is how to have the conversation. When do you start having the conversation with your kids? And I realize, in even saying that, number one, that's a privilege I have about getting to decide when to start to have a conversation about race, because my kid is white. So I recognize that, and so I think that's what I'm kind of coming to terms with. Number one, there's a privilege that comes with, like, when do I get to choose to have the conversation about race with my son who is white? Because other kids, like when you were in 4th grade, or earlier. They know. They've already been told by the time they're 3 or 4. And how do the reason I mentioned, like, you know, why it's difficult to have that conversation and initiate it is because, you know, there's that loss of innocence. So as a parent, you know, to sort of make the affirmative act to like say, okay, this is it. This is, you know, innocence ends now. You know, when do you do it and how do you do it? But I'm recognizing, especially the events of this summer, my son, he just turned 8. He's on the young side. But it's time, and and he's old enough now to start to process all of it. But it's very difficult and it's very painful as a parent. I'm struggling, but I'm very grateful for the leadership of Principal Bolden. She took the initiative and hosted a town hall meeting this summer for parents about this very topic. Like, here we are, let's talk about it. And I think that's the big first step, is to open the door and just get people to be honest about who they are and where they're coming from, and figure out. And we need to figure out together as a community, like, how are we going to do this together and be partners?
It's so. I thank you for being so transparent about that. I think every parent, you know, on here, myself included, has thought about how you always want to protect your children, and even if the protection is not what you think is protecting them, actually might not be, right? You still want to do that. And I think one of the great things about Dr. Kendi's book is that, in the discussion we had, is that kids can handle talking about these complex things. They you know, I think we don't give them enough credit. You see, I just saw it tonight with all of your children. You know, they understand this, and I see it with my kids every night. And for better or for worse, whoever's in the White House, you know, they've been exposed to things that are not normal, and they're going to have an opinion. It's just, are we talking to them about, you know, what's going on, and are they developing, have the tools? Do we give them the tools and the information and the history and all that in the outlet to talk about it in a healthy way? So I really appreciate you saying that. I want to go to Robert Anthony's parents, and then we have a couple questions coming in now from the public. So after we get to the next 2, then we'll start asking some of those. So please. And I think it's Philip and Lois, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. First, I want to put a disclaimer out that despite, and I'm an educator in MCPS for 14 years now, but despite Zooming and virtual communication, it is very intimidating. So I hope I'm able to articulate what I really want to say as I've been listening and processing. But Mr. Body said something about normalizing these conversations, the need to do that. And as an educator, I realized that you had to be very deliberate. And as a parent, you had to be very deliberate with principal conversations and topics. I teach 8th grade U.S. history. And one thing that I've heard for years from my Black students is, why do we always talk about slavery? And that is a narrative that that's probably the only narrative that many African-American and even white students know about the Black experience. And I've heard it said before, in fact, it's a quote outside of my classroom door, that public education is the greatest cultural experience in the United States. A vast majority percentage of our country still goes through public education. And I think one key to being able to normalize these conversations around race is based on education and having those experiences, learning experiences, which are cultural, and being exposed to the experiences of different people and their contributions, their innovations, their inventions. And, you know, from my vantage point, we don't do enough about that. And you know, when the African American History Museum was opened, our school every year tried to get tickets to go. And unfortunately, you know, the backlog and the line is so long, we weren't able to. But I even question our push to do that when we have Jewish students, Hispanic students, students from all different countries and ethnicities. And we should celebrate the totality of our demographics. And so I just think that, and you mentioned curriculum, and I'd love to see that infusion where we really take a look at the experiences and change the narrative of our education model and what we put out there. Because I think when people have an education and understand where people have come from and the whys, then these conversations become a little bit easier to have.
Yeah. Lois, do you want to add anything?
Well, I think he spoke for me too, but I do think, as Principal Bolden was mentioning about the book that they are actually doing how to be an anti-racist.
Dr. Kendi's book. Yeah. That's Dr. Kendi's book.
Yes, I know, and I'm very thankful for my principal at my school, Dr. Palladino, for being able to actually bring this book out to us in our leadership. And I think that hopefully we'll be able to actually pull this and actually do it with the entire staff. That way we're all on board, we're all learning, and that we'll all just be able to just be different. And I am grateful for this opportunity that you opened up for our children and then to the parents. And I think that this is just an amazing start. I think that going into this new school year, we're going in strong, and I just hope that change comes and that these conversations just continue to happen to make us feel more comfortable, even though it may be uncomfortable at first, but us being able to have these discussions, even if it stings a little bit, but we're having them and being upfront, and hopefully change just comes. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn, we have a couple of questions. We have a comment from Deborah. It says, we need better racial justice in history curriculum, to the point that was just made, a couple of points that were just made. How can we be sure that to have this improved as an urgent matter? I trust Dr. Kendi or other scholars on race and history can guide this. I know I'm going to maybe turn to if anyone from the school system wants to answer that. I know the board has pushed forward on some curriculum changes. I think I'll just say, as an education committee member on the council, I think that's a critical point because to the points that were made by Robert Anthony's parents, if you don't understand history, or if you just start at a certain point, it's going to be hard for you to understand where we are right now, and how racism has developed and how it was embedded into everything we do. And so I do think that, and to your point, and as I look at Divine's mom with her beautiful headdress, and my dad's from Nigeria, the thousands and thousands and thousands of years prior to 1619, that is the history and legacy of, Black people on the continent of Africa, the origin of life, and the innovation and things that happened there. That's also a big part of the story, as well as what happened after 1619 when the first enslaved Africans arrived here. They're both critical components. And I don't think, and I know I didn't learn it growing up in schools, and that's something we need to do. So I don't know if any of the folks on the line want to talk about that.
So one of the things we are doing is looking at the social studies, starting with the social studies curriculum, and then we'll eventually build out and examine other areas in terms of how do we tell everybody, how do we tell our stories, and not starting with slavery when we're talking about African Americans. There's a long history, like everybody said, that took place before that. So we don't want to have a danger of a single story, but we want to expand those stories so that you get the whole picture, and everybody needs to hear the stories, because that's how we build understanding. That's how we build respect for one another, that we've all contributed to this thing called the United States and the larger world. So we are starting to look at curriculum and really examine how everybody can see themselves and be celebrated and honored and have their stories told.
Amen.
May I share something as well?
Yes.
And so I was really excited when at the recent board meeting, I heard about our school system's plan for an anti-racist system audit, and curriculum just being one element of that. I can share that at Glen Haven, the leadership team has already started engaging in looking at the language arts materials that our students consume as whole groups. And you know, through our examination of the materials, we're looking for representation and diversity in that. And we're not only looking for that representation, but also how is it represented and what story does it tell? You know, what are the power dynamics that are shown in the images? What are the loaded words and the stereotypes that come through, or the tokenism that might be present in the literature? And so, you know, I look at the work that we're doing kind of on in two ways. One is it's immediate work for our children, right? Our children deserve the best things put in front of them that validate and affirm their identities. But in addition, I believe that it's also educating our teachers to look at these materials with a more critical lens and a more critical eye, and acknowledge and kind of see that sometimes the things that we've used in the past didn't look problematic on the surface, but when you put them together as an aggregate, or when you look a little bit deeper, you do see how there will be children who don't see themselves, children who don't feel their identities affirmed, and that might take away some of their feeling of belonging. And we don't ever want a child to feel like they don't belong in our schools and our classrooms. So I know that, you know, I'm not the only one leading this kind of work, right? And there's a lot of people who are really committed to it. I'm just really excited that our school system is going to be, you know, bringing it up to scale.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we're doing that in county government too. We passed a racial equity law so that everyone in the county government eventually will be trained through our equity office to learn this history. Again, it's just as important for people dealing with policy. So to the parents, we have two comments that are kind of related. One says from Ellen, we should be, as parents, we must be agents of change. We should all be working towards anti-racist initiatives at our schools. And then Danielle asked, how can I tell if my children's MCPS schools are taking the steps that Mr. Body and the principals described? Is there a checklist of best practices for parents to understand? So I want to start with the parents, and I'll maybe start with Thomas's mom. Of, you know, we have some superstar principals on here, you know, right now that are leading this work. But what, you know, talk a little bit about the role of parents to be the agents of change. And I go to you first because I know you mentioned you were very honest about how it's been difficult to figure out how to do this. Talk about your reflection on those two comments, and how you've been an advocate and how you think maybe you could do it more going forward.
Well, I think something that is meaningful to me personally, and something I really strive for, is just inclusion. So at our school, that's why I've become very involved in International Night, which I think is one of the best. It's only one event, but it really showcases, you know, and celebrates the diversity and the richness of our community. And we're not often, just because of schedules and, you know, parents working, you know, we're not always able to get together in one event. But that night draws a lot of people, and it's really a beautiful thing. I mean, I wish we could have it like, you know, twice or three times a year, but it's just not feasible. But I think any efforts as parents, you know, I think PTAs can take the lead on trying to make sure that they're as inclusive as possible when they're doing programming and planning. So like International Night is a school and PTA sponsored event. But I think, and I'm involved in the PTA at our school, but I would love to see us continue to strive to expand our programming and our the way that we do meetings, and to be accessible and available to everyone in our community, and to make everyone feel truly welcome and to be able to participate, to enhance the lives of our kids and our educators.
Awesome. Khalil's mom, I'm sorry, it's Candace. Yes, there we go. What do you think about, have you been an advocate at your school, and what do you think, what would you say that parents should do to get the kind of programming and have the welcoming community that you've seen?
I would have liked to be more of an advocate at my son's school. Being a full-time parent and then coming back and trying to do some of the PTA events, I did do that. And I tried it, and I would go to do the the field trips. I did a couple of those sponsored field trips, and I think it was good to see just the diversity in the parents who volunteered to, and I would go to his class when they had different events. So just seeing that present, like we're not giving that positive present, like, yes, we are involved in our children's lives. Yes, we also care about what's going on, and we want to make sure that they're thriving and getting what they need. So I did make sure I attended as many of those opportunities as possible. It wasn't as much as I in my heart wanted to do. So I had to make that fine balance of home life, work life, and getting into those extracurricular activities and being there for those events. But it was definitely a fun experience to be like, oh, it's Khalil's mom. Like, they started knowing my face, so it was cute. So I did like, and I did enjoy being a part of the school.
It's a good point you bring up, that it's not as easy for everybody to always be engaged. I know my mom was a single mom and was working, and it was very hard for her. I think it's always been a struggle to figure out how do we make it more easy for parents to be engaged. I think Zoom is going to play a big role going forward. I mean, one thing we've all realized, is that there are a lot of ways to engage people. This event is an example. I mean, you can turn the camera off, go back, cook something, come back, be a part of it, and actually participate. So I will go next. If either of the other parents, Robert, Anthony's parents, do you have anything to comment on that? And then we'll go to Hua, and then I want to hear from the administrators as well. Nothing?
No, we're okay.
Okay.
I think everybody said what I would have said, so.
Awesome. So to the administrators, either Mr. Body or the principals, to the point that Danielle asked, how do I tell if my school is doing the steps that you've described here today, and my principal, what does that parent do if they're watching this and like, yeah, I wish that was my principal, or I wish this was happening at my school? What would you tell those parents? Miss Bold, Principal Bolden, you want to go first?
I think that, the question was asked, is there a checklist? And the answer is no, there is not a checklist. The best way to know if this work is happening in your school is by listening to your children talk about how school is. Listen to the stories that your children tell about their school day. Listen to what they're saying to you. Listen to what they tell you is happening in the classroom. Listen to what they're telling you is happening in the cafeteria. Listen to the stories that they tell you about how adults interact with children and how they respond to children. Once again, it's not an indictment against anybody, but sometimes, we have to point out to staff, like, what you said to that child, that child felt like what you said or the way you responded was racist. Now, I know you are not an overt racist, but for some reason, something in that interaction made that child feel that way. And so how do we unpack that? And so those are the kinds of ways that we can begin to impact teachers and staff members and the grownups who are in the buildings. And as we engage in those kinds of conversations with staff, their interactions with children look and sound different. And so once again, my answer is listen to your children. Hear what they're saying to you about interactions with staff and interactions with grownups and what they see and what they hear, because that will shed a lot of light on what's actually happening.
And just to add what Principal Bolden said, it's that idea of intent versus impact. So your intent might have been all well and good, but the impact it had on the student or the family, because sometimes adults have experiences with schools. And so sometimes the evidence of equity is invisible because, like Principal Bolden says, it's how your child experiences school in that totality. What are those experiences? What are those opportunities? What's the access that they're granted? And then sometimes it's having a conversation because you might want to know more details about what's happening, but it's that total school student experience.
Principal Heifetz, do you want to add anything to that? before we wrap?
Yeah, so I absolutely can support and back everything, that's already been shared. I do think that, and my kids are grown, but I've been a parent, and I think that when a parent has a question about what's happening in the schoolhouse, asking that question, being direct and wanting to know, and you can tell if someone's able to really articulate what is happening. Some of it might, as Mr. Bobby said, some of it might seem a little invisible to the parent community, depending on what exactly is taking place, right? But if the principal and the other school teachers can kind of talk through and articulate what's been happening, then it's happening. If there's not really a clear answer there, then that's that opportunity to say, well, it sounds like this is an opportunity. And I'm finding in our community, when we're coming together, parents and staff together, there's just a lot of energy around it. And I think, for parents to know that their voice matters, and to share what their child's experience is and what they want for their child in the school, I really do believe leaders are ready to listen.
That's awesome. Well, I want to give a chance for any parent to say anything as we get ready to close. I did want to say something about what Principal Bolden said earlier, and I meant to make this point, is that being anti-racist, like actively anti-racist, is hard work. All of us have biases, and doing that, even I've talked to Dr. Kennedy about this in the past, even he said he has to work daily and he's the one that coined the term and has written books about it, and we're programmed, and it's really hard work, and you have to do it every day. It's like exercise. You have to get up and really try to work against those biases and understand and learn and deepen your knowledge and understanding. And I think because we've been ignoring it the way most of us grew up and been told not to, we've repressed it for so long, that makes it even harder. And so I think this tonight is an example of, hey, having that conversation and then not getting fatigued by it, because I think that's something I see in my work and in my daily life, is that, okay, we talked about this, let's move on, but you can't move on because it's an everyday thing, and you got to continue it. So I would just ask if there are any comments that want to be made, anything you think need to be shared about your experience or your child's experience, or something that you think other parents or families or kids could benefit from. And we'll start with Divine's mom and see if she has anything to say.
So like you noticed, I'm from Africa. I'm from Sierra Leone. I was a nurse back in Sierra Leone, and I came to the United States. I studied and took my license boards. I had challenges. I had to take a test for spoken English, even though my license was in English. I had my bachelor's. went to have my master's. And so my teaching with Divine always is to tell her that you can be anything you want to be with efforts. It's going to be difficult. You find challenges, but it should never limit your capability. Limit yourself when you know you just can't make it. So it's okay to fail, but always get up and move. So never let somebody put you down. Because if I can do it, you can do it too. So there are good things in America that I have experienced, and I never try to teach her otherwise. But at the same time, I let her understand at age 3, like she said, this is what you will expect, and this is how I want you to respond to it. And I wasn't even sure she remembered it was age 3, but she did remember how to respond to situations like that. So like we all said, start from home, teach your child to value who they are. You can only teach someone right from wrong when you can recognize who you are, acknowledge who you are, to be able to appreciate the next person's values. If you don't know who you are, you got a conflict with theirs, and it's a problem. So Divine have diverse friends, and she just enjoys the company of learning to meet each one, and does not know the difference in a negative way of race. She sees everybody as human and wants to be kind. And I think she gets it from me and our family as a whole. So if you teach your child to be negative and only see that, and then they're gonna see that too. Support her to what she believes in, what she wants to be, and be proud of who she is and her surrounding. And it's going to help we are all struggling through this. And like, is that Thomas, mom? Thank you for speaking up. Yes, it's difficult. It's difficult because your child matters too, just like our children matters as well. So it's an equal situation where you want to make sure your child is comfortable as well. Just like I would like Divine to be comfortable. So how can we do that? Is to learn to teach them to value each other. What Divine doesn't know, learn from the next person. What food do they cook at home? Ask your friend, and I can try and make that, and just be open to change, and then it will be less difficult.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to, since you invoked Thomas, we're going to go to you next, if you have anything to say as we close.
No, they're just gratitude for being here. This is a really important conversation to have, and I'm just so grateful to be in your company. So, and I have a lot of hard work to do. I can't wait to read Dr. Kendi's book.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for being so transparent. Really.
My pleasure.
Miss, is it Lois? And I want to make sure I get both of your names right here. Lois and Philip. Anything from you all?
Well, first, I'd like to just echo the gratitude and the thanks for this opportunity. But we're at a watershed moment, Mr. Jawando, as you said, in our country's history with the events that are going on. And it is so good that there's been a national protest in the smallest of towns into the biggest of cities. We've even seen it across the world. I just read an article the other day about instances of discrimination in Lebanon with African and Asian workers. The study circles, the books, the legislation that is coming forth and hopefully will be put forth are great first steps. But I'd like to go back to something that Dr. King said, is that it starts with the heart and people. And with if legislation, with being in a book circle with people talking is not necessarily going to change. I think going forward, we're really going to have to be deliberate and frequent and search for the opportunities for people to experience each other. And I think of the advantage my kids have in growing up in Montgomery County, such a diverse community. We live in a diverse neighborhood. We have a park in front of our house. Many different ethnicities and races of children come and play. But I think about the vast majority of this country, in this world where people live in racially homogenous societies, environments. And they may know a lot. Some of the most ardent racists are very steeped in African history and African-American history. So I just think that experiences and going forward, and which is why, I posit education as such a forceful tool of bringing people together and creating those experiences. But one of my favorite movies, The Best of Enemies, which some of you are probably familiar with, a Klan leader in North Carolina was turned from his ways. And recently they've been playing Daryl Davis, a gentleman here in Maryland who was actually able to turn the leader of the Klan in Maryland, who was actually a Baltimore City police officer during the day. But their experiences, these Klan leaders' experiences with their Black counterpart, well, I won't say counterpart, but with a Black friend, were able to help change their mind and the trajectory. So I'm hoping that if we could, multiply exponentially those experiences for more people, then we can, really maybe reach that colorblind society. But everything that we're doing is a first step. And I think we've acknowledged that it's a first step, but we've got to be deliberate, frequent, and just keep the ball moving forward.
Lois, anything?
No, he said it all again.
I'm going to start with you next time.
Yeah, start with me next time. Don't start with him.
Thank you all for joining. Candace, last but not least. anything you want to add?
No, it was a great discussion. I think it was in a positive direction, knowing that the change is happening, the conversations are happening, that the silence is not golden. It is a time to speak and have those conversations. I wrestled with having these talks with Khalil because he was always just immersed around diverse culture, so he didn't really get that color, that he was different. But once he started having, more disciplinary problems, I'm like, you're not like other kids. You can't just have those issues. You have to be better. You have to be different. You're going to be judged differently. And I don't want you to be treated differently because you're having disciplinary issues. You're just a child with problems, not a Black child with problems. So it's a different kind of talk, and it's a different kind of story, and you have to behave accordingly. And it's unfortunate that the standard, and we have to work harder to be treated the same, but it is what it is. And we just have to stay forth with those values and make sure he uphold those. So but I think it's all going in the right direction at this point.
Yeah, we got to stay hopeful, and thank you for sharing that. That is really poignant and important, and real, and we've got work to do. So I know Principal Bolden and Principal Heifetz and Director Body are all, along with all my colleagues and school board and everybody in superintendent, we're all in this together. We're going to get it done. And this was a great conversation. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating. And this will be up on Facebook and on YouTube on my pages, Councilmember Will Jawando. I'm sure MCPS will share it for folks. And we got a lot of work to do. And I really appreciate you all participating. And please reach out to me if I can be of assistance, obviously, and we'll be working together. And I'm just going to say to Divine's mom, I have to say this, Sierra Leone has the second best jollof compared to Nigeria. So jollof, but I had to get that in. No, you got yours. I just love jollof. So maybe invite me over so I can have some, please. And we can do our own international night.
I was going to say that. Yes. So I never miss that. I try to go. I'll make that.
All right. I'm there. Next time the schools are open, I'm there. We'll get this group back together. Okay. Thank you all so much. And thank you all for visiting and watching Storytime. Remember, we're here every Wednesday and Friday now because libraries have opened for contactless pickup. And so we'll be here at Storytime live, 11:30 a.m. Wednesdays and Fridays. And you can always watch it on the pages. So good night, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great night.
Good night.